Hey everybody, what is up? My name is Ed Gow Jr. I'm on the steering committee of Dad Central Ontario, and Dad Central is Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I have the blessing of being one of the faces that you see every month in regards to conversations for dads and fathers. And the other day I was thinking, and Drew can correct me on this if I'm not right, but I think that this is the only regular conversation in the world online for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Care.
I think you're probably right, absolutely, on that last part, in particular, sponsored by Dove Men Care. I don't know about any other regular conversations. I know there's lots of different things that are happening,
But
but
by Dove Men Care, notice I put that at the end.
yes.
So I know there's lots of conversation with dads and fathers, but I'd like to say thanks everyone for stopping by again for one of our monthly chats. I look forward to them. And one of the reasons I look forward to it is seeing what facial hair or lack of facial hair Drew has. So I'm going to turn it over to Drew Solon, who is the director of Dad Central Ontario. Hey, Drew, how you doing?
I'm good at. Thanks so much. It's just getting cold outside, so hopefully the more facial hair I grow, the warmer I can be.
So are you going to help me with the top of my crown here then?
I got a hat I'll send you.
Okay.
It'll probably work perfect because that's
all
my
right.
hats.
All right.
Anyways,
Good stuff.
And as always, I'm excited for these conversations. It's coming to the end, obviously, of 2020. But before we do get started, I did want to just take a moment to sort of welcome everyone who's joining us and really just say thank you. It's been definitely a challenging year, I would imagine, for many people. It's certainly been challenging, but we feel we've been able to engage with and serve people through sort of the challenges that you're facing. And so again, this is another opportunity to sort of do that. And so, I think the topic of stress is probably always relevant, but I think this time of year, it can maybe get away from us, or it can sort of compound after what's been obviously in 2020 a pretty challenging year. So I think obviously it's pretty relevant to have the conversation. So I'm looking forward to it. But before we get into it, I do want to just, if this is your first time joining us, just a little bit about Dad Central. So Dad Central's, I guess, vision is to see an involved, an active father in every child's life. And kind of our mission is really about connecting, sort of educating and empowering both dads and communities or organizations to raise healthy children. And so that's really why we exist. And so we do that by a couple different ways. And so one, offering free events like this. We provide free resources to the public. We also have some paid resources that you can access. We train organizations and communities on how to run programs for dads, as well as we help build partnerships, just like one with Dove Men Care, that kind of further that mission. And so that's kind of what we do here at Dad Central. And the other thing is we really do rely on the financial support from the Public Health Agency of Canada, generous partners like Dove Men Care, and donations, as well as some of our training and resource sales to help really allow us to serve more people. And so, if there's anyone on and, you're coming to the end of the year and you're in a great position where you have the opportunity to support an organization, we can always use support. We're connected to the George Health Center for Children and Families, and it's our registered charity. And so if you ever want to support more of the work we do, we really invite you to do that. You can find out more about that on dadcentral.ca. Anyways, but if you would like to learn more about kind of the work we do, our training, our free resources, just go to dadcentral.ca, or you can reach out to us at info@dadcentral.ca. The other thing is that if you're an organization and you want to serve dads, but you're not quite sure how to do it, obviously our training can help, but we can also maybe just run a workshop for you. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to put something together that'll help you and help you serve the fathers that are in your community. So anyways, thank you so much, everyone, for your support of us this year. And I'll give it back to you in a minute, Ed, but 3 quick things before we do that. For everyone who's joined, please just keep your cameras off. It helps us preserve the bandwidth, have a really smooth conversation. 2, we do encourage and want interaction, so please use the chat. Ask questions, comment. We welcome that. It really helps kind of support and keep the conversation going, or bring things up that serve you, because that's really why we're here. And then the third one is we do have a few additional resources that we'd like to share sort of towards the end, so stick around and we'll really get those to you. So that's it. Back to you, Ed. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. This month's topic, what better topic? How can dads de-stress and enjoy the holidays with their kids. And we have a very, very, very special guest with us today. I don't even consider him a special guest. I consider him as a special friend. Brian Russell, former director of Dad Central Ontario, is with us today. Brian, how are you doing?
Well, I'm trying to deal with my stress here, Ed. So it's always good just to sit down and have a good chat about some stuff and sort of find a peaceful, quiet spot in my house to be able to do that. So it's things are good. Yeah, it's good to be connected with you guys.
Wonderful. It's always great to share with you, whether it's digitally or via text on the phone. And looking forward to chopping it up with you as always. And you and I both have hearts and minds to have dads be more involved with their children. And I'm always looking forward to getting your perspectives, your evaluated experience in this. When Drew landed this topic in your lap, what were your first thoughts?
Well, like a bit of excitement because I do like talking about father stuff, and it's I don't do that so much anymore. But yeah, just thinking. So there's that excitement about where could we go? What could we be talking about? What are some ideas? But also really kind of reflecting a bit on this. This is a unique season of stress, I think, in some ways, just because with our pandemic issues, we've been kind of under this stress for months, right? Like just this kind of the world sort of closing in on us and working from home, or just relationships are different, a lot of unknowns, and so I think being able to talk about stress is a really important thing, and trying to work out ways to build our relationships with our kids in the context that might be really stressful. I think it's a really important thing.
Nice. Um, I know you probably are not in touch with fathers as much as you used to be, but the fathers that
Different
you are,
context.
I know you still do. What are they telling you, if at all, about this holiday season? Are they just happy they made it to the holiday season?
Yeah, well, I think there's a big part of that. Like, well, yeah, how did we actually get here? When we did make it. I think there seems to be like this mixed bag in some ways of looking forward to a holiday season, and yet it's a holiday season, because usually, traditionally, a holiday season gives us time. It gives us a bit of space. It gives us a bit of a break from kind of the daily routines that we've been getting into. So we kind of anticipate that sort of thing. We look forward to that. But this year, in some ways, uh, we might feel like we don't know how we're going to get that space or that time, because maybe we've got our kids kind of running around the house all the time. If they're, we're doing school with the kids in a different way. And so there's sort of this we're hoping for a bit of space, and yet we're not sure how we're going to get it, and what that's going to look like. And I think that tension is something that's very real for a lot of parents these days, as they're we got our well, I don't have little ones anymore, but little ones running around. How do we kind of look after ourselves while we're looking after them too?
I go, Drew, did you want to jump in on that?
Well, I have they're not tiny ones anymore, but I definitely have three little ones, and we have done virtual school this year because one of my daughters has compromised immune system, and so in terms of stress, I've certainly experienced it, right? And so I totally resonate with what Brian just said there, and I think I've started to feel it. So while I'm part of this conversation and hopefully sharing a little bit of kind of my experiences and insight and what I've learned, but so I'm also learning as I'm going and kind of going through it. So I think I'm living it and learning it, I guess. And so I kind of look forward to learning, but at the same time sharing what I've gone through, because it's definitely challenging. It's been a stressful fall, a stressful year, and sometimes I haven't even realized how much it has been.
Brian, one of the things you mentioned is many fathers in the past, they look at the holiday season as a time for getting some space, but a lot of fathers may not be getting that space this year.
Yeah. I think that's going to be a tricky thing. And so in my practice, one of the things I think about when I'm working on stress with people is, what's your perspective? Because a lot of times stress is a result of the perspective we're taking on our situation. It's not necessarily like there's things we can't get rid of, right? We can't get rid of our kids. We can't get rid of bills we got to pay. Like there's just things that are just going to be there. And so part of what what I think could be helpful is sometimes looking at, okay, so what's a perspective on this situation that can actually help? Because yeah, I can't just necessarily uh, get the space that I was hoping for. I can't just leave. I can't just or be able to sleep in, or whatever these things might be that would normally be a holiday pattern for me. So I think if we can think about or talk a little bit about what perspective changing can do, like as a dad, when you think that stuff, okay, how can I look at this a little differently, or how can I adjust my expectations? I think that's a big piece of dealing with our stress too.
Okay. Where the challenging thing, I guess, this year is just in, I'm going to put in quotations, normal times.
Yeah.
It's challenging to get that time to put perspective, but there it doesn't seem that there's a lot of time to take time for those perspectives these days.
No. So how do you negotiate that with yourself, but also with your kids? Because I think part of it is that it's important for kids to see, and this maybe, I mean, it's something we probably talk about a lot or mention, and even as dads, we're thinking about this, we're role modeling for our kids how we're handling stress. So what do we want to show them? And how are we reflecting the ways that we are dealing with our stress, the strategies that we have? And so one suggestion, I think, is to think about how can you negotiate with your kids around what space might look like. Because we can get overwhelmed with kids around all the time, and always expecting things, and so and I guess it's hard to be prescriptive in this stuff. I don't think we want to just say, hey, here's the 3 things to do and you should be okay, right? Like, because everybody's context is different, everybody's got different situations, or situations their kids may be in too. So it's kind of like, but if we can take some time to think about how can I negotiate this with my kids, and what's a realistic expectation about what maybe some time on my own would look like, even if it's like 10 minutes in the morning, how do I find that? And how do I help my kids understand that that's what I need? I need to have that kind of time. It kind of makes me a better dad if I can have that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Drew.
Can I jump in then?
Please do.
One, Brian, I think that those are really great points, especially around the expectations. I know as a a dad with young kids, that my expectations around what they can and can't do, or around what I want to see from their behavior, sometimes gets off, and that does actually create stress. But one of the things that I've also learned sort of through this time is that sometimes I wasn't even aware of what was stressing me out, or wasn't even aware of how much stress I was actually experiencing. And the only way that I became aware is because something happened. I was less patient than I would want it to be, or I got irritated by something that maybe didn't match my expectations. And for me, where I've spent a lot of time is trying to identify and become aware of what's causing this stress in the first place. Is it that my expectations are off? Or is it that presentation that my boss was asking me for, that I thought I was going to get it done, but I had to do? Or is it the fact that I have financial stress? Like, am I concerned about maybe this year I've lost a job, or I'm not good. I don't know, how am I going to provide, right? I feel like my role. And so I think the first thing for me is, men, and this is maybe we're kind of like, get the job done, solve the problem, figure it out. We rarely take the time to sort of assess what's that doing to us. And so I find that, by me stopping and realizing, okay, well, like, how am I doing here? What's going on? Having that awareness of what's contributing to my stress enables me to then maybe readjust my expectations a little better, or recognize I do need some of that space. I need that 10 minutes of quiet time, in the morning, or when I need it is after I finish my workday, because I got all that stress from work that's carrying up, that's building up, and I can't have a flurry of demands coming at me as soon as I step out of my office door, my home office door, or come in the door. So I think the awareness piece for me is something that I've learned is really powerful.
It's a good point, Drew. And it's really good. Brian, did you want to add anything to what Drew just said?
Well, yeah, Drew, what you're making me think there about is how sometimes we blame our situation, or we blame the context. And I'm using that word intentionally. We kind of say, if the situation changed, I'd be okay. Or if this part of my life changed, then I'd be okay. I wouldn't be so stressed. But sometimes we can't change those things. Right? And so that's where thinking, like Drew, like we were saying there, just what are my expectations? So being able to take the time to ask that kind of question of, okay, it's not so much the situation, it's how I'm reacting to the situation, and what's behind that. What's actually getting squeezed out of me when the pressures of life or whatever these things are coming around me. What's coming out, and what might be the root of that? So I think it's finding, and here's another issue, right? Like, how do we find the time to even be that kind of be that reflective with ourselves
Yeah.
when everything is pretty busy? But I think part of caring for ourselves helps us care for our families better, and we can run ourselves into the ground if we're not able to find the time to actually take a few minutes and think, okay, yeah, what's getting squeezed out of me when I'm in this context? Like that's a question I don't think I ask myself that often. I need to be thinking that more.
It's interesting. We're in the holiday season, and one of the famous songs during this time of year is Joy to the World.
Mm.
And one of the things I'm asking a few fathers is, what's your joy meter right now on a scale of 1 to 10? What's your joy meter at? And if it isn't where it's supposed to be, what can kick it up a notch?
Yeah.
Having that joy meter at this time of year, because I think this year we potentially have more fathers that are not joyous than any other time in a long time.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because what you're doing is driving that awareness for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They may not have anyone willing to stop them in their tracks by asking that question, and you're forcing them to reflect a little bit, to say, oh, actually, my joy meter's here, and then from that place they can make a choice. They can choose, well, I can stay at my 2 or 3. I saw somebody commented, thanks very much for that comment, 3 for Daniel, and then say, well, is that where I want to be, and what would I need to do differently to shift it around, or what's contributing to my 3, and what can I control and what can I not?
Oh, and Drew, I'm glad you say that. Like, control is a big piece of stress management kind of stuff. Like, just really, really being able to assess what can I change and what's happening that really I don't have any control over. Like, we can't control a pandemic. We can't control the decisions school boards made. We can't control bosses saying you got to stay home or you got to come in. Like, we can't control those things. But what we can control are things that, okay, what's my perspective? How am I thinking about this? What's my expectations? Maybe I can control my routine a little bit. So I think that, like, almost having a list of, this is under my control, here's those things outside of my control. And stress often comes when we're trying to actually control the things we have no control over.
Right.
And so go ahead, Ed.
No, and I just wanted to say thank you to Daniel and Laszlo. Laszlo, I hope I get your name right. If not, it's my head, not my heart, but just being so open to just say where their joy meter is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe one of the greatest gifts that some dads can give themselves and their kids is do some self-reflection over the holiday season. And I'm seeing another, pandemic focus on Michael is saying the pandemic has maybe reset my expectations and helped me focus on what really matters. And that has made me happier. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of times when we get into crisis, that's what actually forces us to start thinking differently, and I think a pandemic has done that. I think, actually, honestly, even having kids can do,
Yes.
maybe the birth of your first child can be this crisis that says, well, okay, what's important here now? What do I really want my life to be built around? And what do I want people to know me as? And like, what part of my character matters? Like, all that kind of stuff we can start thinking about, because we're facing this crisis, which makes us kind of look at things a little differently.
Nice.
Well,
Nice.
yeah, I think those are, again, another great point. The only other element I think is important is acknowledging that, the stress that you might be going through, right? Or acknowledging that this is actually quite difficult, right? And the same thing every single day can actually contribute to stress. And for me, that's kind of what it's felt like. I get up, I have my morning routine, and then the kids are there, and it's virtual school, and then it's off to my office, and then it's work. And it just kind of, I'm like, I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. I want to go exercise. I want to go on an adventure. I want to do stuff. And the loss of that can actually contribute to stress as well. And so I think the important part is acknowledging when you have identified and are aware of it, that this actually can be a stressful event. Sometimes we try and diminish it, or we try and say, I can handle it, it's no big deal. And sometimes that's not actually serving your ability to work through that stress, and so I just feel like sometimes the ability to acknowledge it, and I think there's a stigma attached to that sometimes, like, what's the big deal? Like, whatever, you just get up, like, you've got everything taken care of. Why are you stressed about that? Totally fair. But, each person's context and experience is slightly different. And so for them, it's more just acknowledging it to yourself. And I think for me, working closely with my partner and my wife and saying, what, here's kind of what's going on. And, this is how it's affecting me. Just the simple, like, me acknowledging it and then having somebody else be able to acknowledge it for me helps some of that stress dissipate. But, I think acknowledging is another thing that sometimes we don't necessarily do enough of.
Yeah. And I think I'll sort of generalize some gender things here, but I think in general, guys struggle with saying, maybe I am weak, or maybe I do have a problem, or maybe I'm struggling with this, right? Like, and to acknowledge that, not even just to ourselves, but actually to verbalize that and have another guy or two that you just say, you know what?
Yeah.
This is hard for me and I don't know the answers and I can't fix this thing.
It's interesting you're saying that, Brian, and we got a question for you right after I share something here, but I just thought about the AAA, and it's the AAA: acknowledge, ask, accountability partner.
Yeah.
It just came to my mind because there are so many fathers, like you just shared right now, acknowledging it, that, you have a challenge.
Yeah.
And then the next big barrier is ask for help.
Yeah.
And then the next step, if you have that accountability partner, have that ride or die father, for lack of a better term, that is with you in good and bad. I just thought about that AAA.
Yeah. There you go. That's good.
Right now. Have a question for you from the audience. Brian is saying, what are your thoughts on using outside factors, i.e. the pandemic, as an excuse for not accomplishing more than you wanted to? Good question. He says, I've had peers allow me that excuse, but I don't personally feel that something should be a factor. It's a great question for a dad.
Yeah, I love that word excuse, because I think that's kind of what your comment hinges on there, Nathan. It's this idea of if I have an excuse, that lets me off the hook. So if the way I think about this kind of stuff is that there are realities that make life hard, especially these days. I mean, there's the realities of these external factors kind of pressing on us. They are going to affect how we work. They're going to affect how we relate with people. They're going to affect how we spend our time. They're going to affect a lot of things. And so I think it's helpful to think about this not as an excuse so I can get away with something, but I think accepting that there are realities that will actually reduce my effectiveness or my efficiency at work, and to look at them as realities. But not as an excuse to say, well, I don't have to worry about that, right? Because you do. You got responsibilities. I get that. And I think a piece of it too is kind of honestly looking at, if I can go back to the expectation thought, sometimes we might not allow a reality to, what am I trying to think? We might not allow the reality to really have a sense of, or sorry, getting lost in my words here. Having that reality, I think, can help us accept where we're at and be able to say, okay, that's an adjustment of expectations, because maybe I can be a little freer to say I have not been as efficient, and actually that's okay. It's okay because that sort of lowers my expectations on myself a little bit. So I don't know if that helps, Nathan, but that's just some thoughts there I have around excuses and reality are not necessarily the same thing. Excellent. And what do we do with our own expectations? Am I trying to live up to something that maybe I just can't do now? And how do I deal with that? I don't know, Drew, or do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Drew first.
Well, in terms of having goals and having targets that you wanted to achieve, I'm assuming that this is very work related. I have I'm not sure if you can hear it. I now have a new dog in the background. So my apologies for that.
Was that a pre-Christmas gift?
That was a pandemic decision. My wife was like, "We're getting a dog." Okay, sounds good.
There you go.
She's always wanted one. So I
Okay.
digress, though. But in terms of having goals, as an example, my wife broke her foot about 4 weeks after getting a new dog, and so that meant and the plan was she was going to be doing the walking. So the reality is, it's not an excuse, and what it meant is I would have to adjust my schedule, the work that I would do. And if I wanted to achieve those specific goals or targets, I would have to make the required adjustments. And so would it potentially come at a cost? Maybe it would come at a cost of maybe some additional late nights, could working on extra projects. And those are choices I have to make. And then would I correspond or counterbalance that with decisions on extra downtime or extra time with my kids or those types of things to be able to help balance me out. So as far as, I think it's all a matter of what Brian's point is, it's how you view it. If you use the fact that something has gone on that's affected your productivity and you say, well, I can't do anything, and you absolve yourself of a responsibility in taking action, then it's different than simply saying, I've taken all the actions I can, but the reality is that you can't get water from a stone, and I've done all that I can do. And so therefore, that's why I'm not able to achieve those targets.
Yeah, I think part of dealing with our stress too is kind of being gracious to ourselves, and just looking at, okay, where am I maybe just landing so heavy on myself with expectations or feeling like I got to live up to something, and again, it's not letting ourselves off the hook. It's taking that step back to look at this realistically, like, what's my context now, what's changed. I mean, there's this word pivot that I think we're, companies that have pivoted with COVID, or like there's this idea we've been hearing a lot of just how have I been flexible? How have I been able to adapt and change to the reality of what life is like now? And that's not just pandemic stuff. That's having kids forces us to be flexible. Getting a new relationship can force us to do that. New jobs, like we go through different things all the time that are forcing us to be flexible. And I think the more flexible we can be and look for options and see opportunities, that's one way to kind of ward stress off a little bit too.
I just want to build on something you said there, Brian. I think you mentioned the word grace. And that's one of the things I really, when I'm speaking with fathers these days and sharing with fathers, is that I tell them to give themselves grace. And 75% of them, when they hear that, they exhale right on the spot. Like, someone has given me permission to give myself grace. And especially at a time, some fathers may be going through some challenging times, and the whole commercialism at Christmas time. I think it's really, really important, like all year round, especially at Christmas time. I say to fathers and caregivers, like men that are caregivers, give yourself grace. It's really, really important.
Well, and Ed, the breath that you just talked about is such a powerful and important piece that can allow us to simply begin the process of de-stressing.
There you go.
To breathe. Because the reality is that we get so tense, we get so tight, we get so strained trying to carry the load that we feel that we're carrying, or the things that we can't control that we're fighting against. And like I call it, take a pause. Like what it can happen in the moment, or it can happen when you recognize you're feeling the stress. And just breathing properly is a simple and powerful tool that I am sort of saying this as I needed to take this in and do it myself. I've had to do it a couple times today, and it's something that is really powerful, an important step. Right, just taking a few breaths, recognizing, allow to calm yourself down, and then move on from there. Don't react. Pause. Breathe. Okay, let's move forward.
Yeah. Well, another thing I want to add to the dads out there too is that taking a break is a good thing. Like you just said, Drew, and I always use the analogy of the Indianapolis 500. I'm not a big race fan, but I realize that no driver wins the Indianapolis 500 without taking a pit stop. So dads, especially I really want to encourage dads during this holiday season, if you can, take those pit stops.
And I'm looking through Tim's comments there too about sharing the load, and like there's a pit crew, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
you don't drive into the pit stop and then fix your own tire and change your own oil, and like there's people there that you're relying on, and the team gets through life with that kind of thing. And so, like, they're really taking a good look at like who's in your life that you can really rely on, and who else do you like, maybe there is a gap, and how can you go about finding that kind of support and care too, and be that kind of person for other people. Like when we give too, like giving our care to others is an important thing.
Yeah, I want to just build on that, Brian. And I know that Drew's in agreement. It's so key for our dads out there to have a brotherhood, brother dads or whatever, other dads in their camp, because it's not easy. And you can't. And I was having a conversation with a PhD the other day, and she said, fatherhood is not isolation.
Yeah.
And I loved that
Mm.
quote. And as I know we're talking a lot about Father's Day, but hey, the better the fathers are, the better involvement they have with the kids, and we're all about the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, when I heard that quote, fatherhood is not isolation, if you have that downtime, take that stress out. One way you can relieve that stress is, hey, call up a buddy, see if he has some free time, and just hang out for a little bit over the holiday season, because you need that. You need that father brotherhood, for lack of a better word.
And Movember, I think, launched something probably in June, after the first couple of months of the pandemic. And it was a simple action, right? Just basically reach out to a friend. It could be a text. It could be how's it going? How are you
Yeah,
doing? Just creating that space or that opportunity. It doesn't have to be with an expectation, but even the thought of somebody thinking of you can be valuable, and taking that step. And I think, to Tim's point in the comments, is that we tend not to do that. We tend to hunker down, and whether it's we got this, we can handle it, I'm okay, I don't need it, it's always valuable to feel like somebody's thinking of you. And so I think sometimes just the smallest of steps can offer a ton of value. And to the other point of, for me, hearing stories from other dads or other men who have either going through something that is maybe harder than what I'm going through, gives me a dose of perspective, and maybe it shifts me to feel more grateful. Or somebody who has gone through something that I'm going through and can offer me a word of encouragement. And even if it doesn't happen, it's more just me. I think there's so much power in just hearing another dad share his story, whether you choose to comment or not, whether you just happen to be a fly on the wall, because then you feel like, okay, I'm not in this alone. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, I agree with that, Drew. And storytelling, and I always many times guys don't get a chance to tell their story, right? And I think I'd mentioned on a previous conversation we did this year, there's a gentleman lives around the corner from me, and it was a few months ago, and he was outside getting ready to leave for work, and he does HVAC. And we had a quick conversation. I said, hey, how you holding up during the pandemic? Well, I was home a bit more than I was used to, but he said, I had a great time to get to know my daughter better.
Mm.
And he said, yeah, I taught her how to ride a bike. And I said, that's fantastic. And she's like 7 years old. And he goes, yeah. And I got her to ride a motorbike. I go, I hope she was wearing a helmet. He goes, yeah. But he was so happy about those things of reconnecting and getting a deeper, meaningful relationship with his daughter. And then on the other end, I have the philosophy, for especially with fathers, again, don't waste the crisis. And a few months ago, my dad took me to a celebration of his best friend's 85th birthday.
Mm.
And at the end of the evening, they asked for speeches. And my dad got up there and he said two things that really rocked me. And not only from a fatherhood perspective, but a manhood perspective. He said, first, I've known this man longer than anybody here, even his wife. And then the second thing he said was, this man has been my best friend for 70 years.
Wow.
That just blew my mind. And I said, and I share that story a lot with fathers to encourage them, like, to have those meaningful friendships with other dads. because I don't know if I'm going to live 70 years, but these gentlemen, I've known them, like my dad's known me all my life, and this other gentleman's known me all my life, and they've been best friends for 70 years. And it's a form of encouragement that it can be done. And again, it helps them and it helps their families and it helps all our families. It's a great model to work with.
Oh, that's a great story. That's such an encouragement, like just to be thinking about the value of other people in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, other men in our lives,
Yeah.
especially for the dads. It's just, it was just really an emotional moment. It really made me get some introspective with the I don't call it the work, the passion I do with fathers and men. I just thought I give that story to a lot of men to give them that encouragement that it can be done. And that's friends in 2 different countries over those 70 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and as we're talking about stress and the relationships and value, and you know, I think about, you know, when I'm stressed and how I'm able to show up at home, or let's say I've connected with somebody, I've shared a story, and I feel that much better. I come back and I'm re-energized, or I'm a little bit more relaxed. I'm a little bit more at peace, and I think what I notice is the difference that means sort of for my kids. And I'm sure, you know, most dads can probably experience that, right? Like you think of when you got stuff going on, or when you're able to actually be present, you know, be there with them. And I think that the reason why I think it's so valuable is we think about what does that mean for the kids as far as what they feel from us. And then what does that do for them as far as, you know, we know what the research says about an involved father and a strong relationship between a dad and a child. And so, you know, that's when, you know, at this time of year, we get caught up in sometimes the gifts and all those other things, but I find it's so powerful when for our kids, all they really want is time. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but I've been enjoying watching some Sunday Night Football through the fall, and Toyota has this great commercial, right? It's I think it's an animated one where it's a kid, he's writing a letter to Santa, and then all of a sudden the dad walks in the door, and then the window opens and the letter blows away. And so dad does this thing, gets the kid in the van. They go out and they're driving, and they're driving, you know, all over the place, and they end up on this mountaintop. And dad, at the last second, rescues and grabs the letter to Santa because he saves it for his son. He looks at it and reads it. Dear Santa, all I want for Christmas is a trip with dad. And so it's just that moment where you're like, you know what? Time with dad is really what kids want, right? They don't want all these other things. And so the ability to let go of some of these stresses enable that to happen more. And I think that's the real powerful thing. And I think that's why it's so important to have this conversation and talk is how do we engage with our kids as a result of this working through the stresses that we have going on.
That's good. That's good. I just want to jump in here and a little bit of a promotion coming up. I have an article coming up on Dad Central called the 13 Life Lessons from Classic Holiday Movies and TV Specials. And Drew, a few moments ago, you talked about the commercialism of Christmas. And one of the points in there is from the classic cartoon, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And one of the lessons there is you got to, dads, as much as possible, resist the commercial pressures. The Grinch learned that Christmas doesn't come from a store. Focus on the true meaning of the holidays by sharing it with time with loved ones, your family, and others, and looking for ways to make others happy other than commercial ways.
Yeah.
Brian, anything you want to add in regards to a point like that, or just ways that fathers can have less stress around this holiday season?
Yeah, well, I'm actually just looking at Mike's comment there,
Yeah.
and his the idea about being vulnerable, and I really like that the idea of it's not just being vulnerable with other guys, but again, when we're modeling for our kids how we're managing our stress, for us to be able to say, hey, this is not like I'm going through something right now, guys. Like I need a either I need a break, or you know I need to pray for me, like you mentioned there, Mike, or there's something you can ask for from your kids. And what you're saying to your kids there is it's actually okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for something. It's okay to maybe not know how to handle something. It's okay to rely on somebody else. Like you think of all those great messages that we would want our kids to be growing up with and kind of building their life around when they get into stressful kind of situations. So I think, you know, so being vulnerable, I think there's two other things that have been standing out as we've been talking here too is kind of the idea about presence. not Christmas presents. I mean, that adds stress as much as it might take stress away. But the
Yeah.
presence of a father, like what is your presence with them? And so really thinking that through. Um, and then also your perspective, right? And and both of those are kind of very reflective sort of things. Um, but and so that's personal kind of stuff. But then when you start thinking about what do I do with my kids, like it's winter time. Like, can you get out for walks? Can you? I mean, we try to go skating, and in Toronto here now, we have actually have to book our time for 45 minutes on the skate rink because we're actually booking skating 2 weeks ahead because it's filling up. And so maybe part of being um, proactive over the next couple of weeks is thinking about what do we want to be doing, and maybe I got to be adjusting how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like looking ahead 2 weeks from now to say I got to book a 45-minute skating time with my kids 2 weeks from now. Like, what's up with that? Like, what what is that? But that's the reality where we are. So I think it's going to take some creativity in how you spend time with your kids too, and looking for those little opportunities.
And I just want to build from that too, Brian. Ask your kids what they want to do.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I've worked with I've helped some fathers, and I say, so what do you do when you're with your kids? Well, I just watch them play games.
Mm.
And I say, here's a novel idea. Why don't you ask them what they'd like to do with you? And
Yeah.
many a time, the next time I see that father, you can just even before he speaks a word, you can see the smile on his face. He's so happy, so proud that he's entered into a new relationship, not only with himself, but with his kids that he had never experienced before.
Right.
And that joy that father has, you as a father will have,
Mm-hmm.
you can't buy that back. No, that's like it'd be the greatest Christmas gift you ever had, because you'll never forget it. More importantly,
Mm.
you're modeling for your kids, as I think either Brian or Drew has said earlier, kids emulate what they replicate, right?
Mm.
So if they see you being joyous, being giving at the holiday season, that sets them up. Not to say it's going to be 100% down their line, but you're setting the right example for them. And we want to do the best we can as fathers to set the right example for our kids, because they're going to have to get out in the world themselves. And you want to make sure that you've had the right positive impact on their
Right.
lives so they can be successful as possible to carry on that legacy that you've put in them.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is to be prepared for maybe kids don't buy into what we're trying to do. Right? Like
Yeah.
I might have this great idea, or I might even ask them, and they might, I don't know. Like I was thinking about there's a scene in the Christmas Vacation movie where they're driving in the car, and mom and dad are in the front, and they're singing. I think it's "Deck the Halls." I think they're singing, and then
Yeah.
dad turns around and says, "Okay, take it away." I can't remember his son's name, but take it away. And there's silence in the back seat. Right? Nothing. And then the parents they just keep on singing. So I think we got to be, I would want to not kind of get sort of drowned in my disappointment if my kids didn't do what I was planning or what I was hoping for. I might have this big expectation and then it falls flat. Like, he's not joining me in singing. Well, I just go on anyway, right? So that's a sort of a piece of the perspective too. And how do we handle maybe those little disappointments that come along when things don't go the way we thought they would?
Piggybacking on that
Yeah.
too, Brian, though, as a dad, also be open to new things,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Open to those new things, because those things will bring as much enjoyment to you as it will to them. And then it just amplifies the relationship between you and your children or
Yeah,
kids, because they say dad's willing to try some new things. Wow, that's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
It's a great opportunity if you're there to try those new things to enhance that relationship with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ed. Especially with depending on where people are, there could be various restrictions in place. You're not doing the normal
Right.
trip that you'd be doing. You're not seeing the normal people you'd be seeing. So this holiday season, can be there's loss there for people, and
Yes,
also for
Absolutely.
kids, our children, and they'll could be experiencing loss and disappointment. Oh, we can't see so and so. Oh, like, why not? And it's hard probably on us as dads, but it's also harder on our kids. And
Mm.
so, this is where I love your statement of give grace, because it's both for ourselves to recognize, hey, this is hard to go through because I don't want my kids to be disappointed, but like, what can we do? It's out of our control, to Brian's point, but also give grace to our kids, because the reality is, I can't imagine what it's like for me, I've got younger kids, some might have teenagers, might have older, who knows, right? But there are various stages, but that idea of trying something new, what can we do to create a new tradition that's positive, that builds the relationship, that builds the connection in the face of this loss of what we might normally do, and getting creative and focusing on kind of what works for your family. What are the things that build those bonds? I saw, and hopefully we'll share some of these additional resources after, a couple different articles about, here's 40 COVID safe ways to build new traditions this holiday season, or here's a ways to build that connection and relationship time, because that's really all that matters with your kids right now. And here's a great board game that's about building relationships and allowing people to share and talk more and share, and also talk about their feelings, because the reality is so there's some really cool things that you can do that don't require a lot. It's kind of one new thing, maybe one new game you decide to play over the course of the holidays, and that becomes the new tradition. Who knows? But I love your points, being open to new things. I love your points, being, giving grace. All those things kind of all come together, and ways we can, enjoy the holidays by creating something new, or engaging in what matters most, the relationship piece, right?
I think, Drew, excellent stuff too. And one of the things we also have to understand as dads is some of our dads have suffered loss during the holiday season. We can't, I never like using the word assumption, because it's one of the most dangerous words in the world. And we have to just understand that some dads have had loss during the holiday season, and accept them where they're at. Not everyone's going to be cheery. Even, yes, there's a pandemic going on, and then you could have a father that's had loss, whether it's a loss of a spouse, loss of a child, loss of a relationship during the holiday season. And again, giving them grace and accepting them where they're at in this time I think is a great point that I just thought of, Drew, when you just said about, not everyone's going to be happy during this time. Yeah, there's pandemic stuff, but there's other stuff that they could be experiencing that if in their past, that holiday season isn't the happiest thing.
Yeah. And sometimes I think too, when we think about what we want our kids to take away from situations, just thinking about how, what are the memories that our kids are going to have? And Nathan, you made a comment there in the chat that, your daughter will likely forget a lot of this COVID stuff when she's older, because she's just a toddler. And yeah, that absolutely, that makes sense. And that made me think about how, what the value of, for us as dads, to be thinking long-term in the sense of, what do I want my kids to be thinking about and kind of remembering as they do grow up? What are those stories? Like, how am I creating stories now for my kids? And I think a lot of times kids don't remember that they got that great big Lego set when they're 6 years old. They're going to remember that they went skating with their dad, or like they're going to remember experiences more than things.
Yes.
And so I think when whatever the situation is, whether we're dealing with loss or we're dealing with stress or whatever it is, like it's recognizing that the little moments are often those things that actually kids are going to remember, and we're going to be able to build on those sort of things. So it's not about trying to make something huge and spectacular over the holidays. It's about taking those small moments, and because that's where life really is lived. We don't jump from big moment to big moment. Like, that'd be exhausting if everything was kind of, huge like that. We live in these little moments. And so if we can kind of grasp each of those each time, and kind of have this idea that my kids are taking memories away from this, then I think that's a perspective that can help us kind of live in the moment, I guess, which is a good way to manage our stress too, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brian. Sorry, Ed, I gotta hop in here quickly, because
No, take your time. Go ahead.
the thing that, for somebody like me who, you guys know me, I like to have a plan. I like to have some structure. I kind of like to know what's going on, maybe my sense of control. And, to the point of memories, sometimes the memories the most powerful memories are when things like go off the rails.
Absolutely.
And it's completely and you're like, that
yeah.
becomes the stuff of legends, because it's a story of when everything went wrong and nothing went according to plan.
Yep.
And in the moment, you're probably like, this is driving me insane.
This is the worst thing ever.
Exactly. But and so I think it's great in those moments when things are going off the rails. How can we make it through this in one piece and then look back on it and with a dose of perspective and have it be a real positive memory as opposed to getting the stress of the situation, because reality could be super stressful what you're going through. How do we move through this so that it becomes a thing we can see as a positive memory as opposed to like the time that everything just turned into it.
We had the classic road trip thing of driving up through Newfoundland and our head gasket blew up at the top of Newfoundland. So we left Toronto. We're thousands of kilometers away from home. And you know that big thing, your head gasket, well, it did up in the top of Newfoundland.
Oh, wow.
But you know what? We have so many great stories out of that if that hadn't happened, I think it would still been a good trip, but we've just got all these other memories and things that happened around that situation. So it's like, and Drew, that's what I appreciate you saying that, because it's like the crisis creates the memories, and how we manage the crisis and how we live through that, and the choices we make, and even things that just happen around us in that crisis, that creates this sense of bond with our kids. And that's the stuff that they talk about later on.
Yeah, definitely. Storytelling.
Yeah,
You're gonna have to tell me about that story offline, Brian. You've got me very curious on how you pulled yourself out of that one.
Yeah,
that's good.
Well, yeah, so maybe another call sometime.
Yeah, not right now. Absolutely. You want to talk about head gaskets blowing and all that stuff. That'd be fantastic. And if you're watching this right now live, and you also probably get on the replay, or if you're on the mailing list, you'll get some. Drew is putting in some resources for people, and this is good. Tim is it's a good point. And again, if you can do it at this time, dads and fathers, take part, if you have that extra time over the holiday season, to get involved with your kids. You'll have a tighter bond. Yeah, like Tim is saying, they watch TV together. What they watch, being there, he says being there is what's important. I agree. Being there and what you're doing when you're there to create those memories that Brian has just spoken about are just really, really important. Really, really good. Brian, anything else you're wanting to add as we wind it down here a little bit?
You know, I think we've covered a lot of great things. And it's been great to hear. I've loved this conversation. It's kind of tweaked some thoughts for me too, just around my own perspectives and how to look at things. So, yeah, I guess the takeaways for me are just like, what's my perspective, and how can I get time to actually think those things through, and then the presence, right? Like the presence we have with our kids, just recognizing our kids are looking for that. They will thrive off of our presence. So one of the questions would be like, what kind of presence do I want my kids to experience from me? And again, not Christmas presents like Lego, but actually my presence. Like, what's it like to be me with them?
I agree. One of the things that I as a take home, I'm going to ask dads is, what gift can you give your kids or your children that you don't have to buy anything? So what I mean by that is, one of the things you do is just spending some more time with them, just hanging out with them. Get the commercialization out of it. What can you do with what you have at Christmas? What gift can you give them where you don't have to go out and buy something? Work at what you have with what you got, because I believe most dads have the toolkit right there. They just got to put it in action. Brian, do you agree with that? Do you think that makes sense?
I think in a lot of ways, this may sound like a weird way to put it, but we're the best toy we can give to kids.
Love that.
We're the jungle gym.
Yep.
We're the listening ear. We're the, whatever it takes. Like we have such value in the time that they spend with us, and recognizing that's really what it's all about. Right? It's not just for me to feel better as a man because I'm a good dad, quote unquote. It's actually what I do and how I talk and the things that I do around my kids. It's meant to instill certain qualities and values in them. And so the more joy I have in my kids, the more they're going to feel their own value too. If my kids feel like I want to be with them, like I have joy around them, that just speaks value so much to their little heart saying, do I matter? Do I matter? And yeah, if I'm joyful around my kids and I want to be with them, that's a huge message to them that money can't buy.
Brian, I absolutely say that was just a knowledge bomb you just dropped there about the best toy you can give your kids is you as a dad. That I think that's fantastic. I think that's a great way to end off the conversation. Drew, I'm going to pass it over to you, but I'd just like to wish everybody a happy holiday season. It has been an absolute joy to be with all of
What's
you.
your joy meter at here?
Yeah, it's a joy. My joy meter is always at like an 11 out of 10 when I'm doing any stuff for Dad Central. So it's been a joy to well, joy with Brian always, joy with Drew, joy with Dad Central. Also joy with the third member of our team, Sean, is an absolute joy, and also Dove Men Care. Thank you, absolute joy. Looking forward to it in
Great.
2021. And I'm just going to put out to dads there. Remember to give yourselves grace. Drew?
Mhm. Thanks so much, Ed. Thank you, Brian. I always enjoy the conversation as well. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us. A couple quick things I want to share quickly before we wrap up. One, we want to continue offering these opportunities in 2021. So we're really excited to create a new lineup of things. We've got some of them planned, but we also elicit your feedback. The more we send a survey, so the more you can fill those things out, that helps drive the content that we begin to produce for you next year. So that's one. Two is, if you at Dad Central, we want to continue to serve you, and we're going to increase our training. So we've got 3 actual training events that are coming up, designed to help you if you're a family service organization, support fathers. One's in January, one's February, one's March. Okay, and they're 3 different ones. And so please take a look on dadcentral.ca. We've got those training events all set up. And I think maybe the third thing is really just more of a thank you. It's been a challenging year, yet you've chosen to come to these events, to engage in the content that we're producing. And it's only because we know you either want to serve and support fathers and families, or you're a dad yourself and you want to engage and be the best that you can be for your family. And so just a thank you for taking that step, for trusting us, for engaging with what we're offering. And we hope and that it continues to add value to you and your journey, whether it's serving families or as a dad yourself. And so if you found it helpful, tell somebody about us. Let them know that Dad Central's here, that we've got great free resources, and we've got these opportunities for you to engage and connect with other dads, other service providers, and ways to help serve families more. So with that, I just want to say thanks so much, Ed, for an amazing year. You have led these conversations, brought us through some amazing topics, and made it look effortless and flawless. So thank you so much for your contributions. Wishing everyone a wonderful holiday season, however you choose to celebrate. And we look forward to seeing you back here in 2021 and with more fun stuff and more things to help serve others and families. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.